What if you're hiking across a melting glacier when you spot something strange poking through the ice? You bend down for a closer look and realize you're staring at a perfectly preserved artifact that hasn't seen daylight in thousands of years. Across the globe right now, ancient ice is releasing secrets that were never meant to be found. From Stone Age tools that shouldn't exist to mysterious objects that defy explanation, these discoveries are forcing scientists to rewrite everything they thought they knew about human history. What you're about to see will make you question whether our ancestors were far more advanced than we ever imagined. Let's start with something that completely baffles archaeologists. Hidden in a cave in China called Guiyangdong, researchers discovered stone tools created using a technique called the Levallois method. Sounds simple enough, right? Wrong. This wasn't your typical smash rocks together approach that early humans used for hundreds of thousands of years. The Levallois technique required serious planning and skill. Ancient toolmakers would carefully shape a core stone into a very specific form, kind of like a sculptor working with marble. Then, with one precise strike, they could pop off a flake that came out already shaped and ready to use. No additional sharpening needed. It was repeatable, efficient, and honestly pretty genius. Here's the problem. These tools date back somewhere between 170,000 and 80,000 years old. That means people with supposedly primitive brains were using advanced manufacturing techniques that required abstract thinking, planning ahead, and passing down complex knowledge through generations. We're not talking about lucky accidents here. This was sophisticated engineering frozen in time. Deep inside Hohlfels Cave in Germany, archaeologists made a discovery that changed everything we thought we knew about ancient art. They found a tiny figurine, barely 2.5 inches tall, carved from mammoth ivory. But this wasn't just any carving. The Venus of Hohlfels depicts a woman with exaggerated features, enormous breasts and hips, barely any visible head. Modern eyes might find it strange, but archaeologists believe this was intentional. It likely represented a fertility goddess or symbol, something incredibly important to people whose survival depended on successful reproduction. What makes this discovery mind-blowing is the craftsmanship. Carving mammoth ivory is incredibly difficult. The material is hard, brittle, and one wrong move could shatter hours of work. Whoever created this figure possessed remarkable skill and patience. They also had the tools sharp enough to work such demanding material. But the Venus wasn't alone. The same cave yielded flutes made from bird bones and more mammoth ivory, complete with finger holes that could play actual musical notes. Creating these instruments required precision drilling without cracking the bone, knowledge of acoustics, and an understanding of music itself. This wasn't survival. This was culture, art, and expression from people living tens of thousands of years ago. Flash forward to Mesa Verde in Colorado, where the ancestral Puebloans built something extraordinary into a cliff alcove. The Sun Temple looks like it was designed by ancient mathematicians who understood geometry better than most modern students. The structure follows precise geometric patterns. Archaeologists identified the 3-4-5 triangle, a simple but effective way to create perfect right angles. They found evidence of the golden rectangle, a proportion that shows up in nature and classical architecture because it just feels balanced to the human eye. This wasn't random construction. Every measurement was intentional. But here's where it gets really interesting. Parts of the temple align perfectly with the sun's position during summer and winter solstices. The builders were tracking celestial movements, using the sun as a massive cosmic clock to mark seasons, plan ceremonies, and organize agricultural cycles. They accomplished all of this without modern surveying equipment, computers, or even written mathematical formulas. Just observation, knowledge passed down through generations, and remarkable skill. On the southern coast of South Africa, Blombos Cave holds evidence that might be the earliest proof of abstract human thought. Scientists found chunks of ochre, an iron-rich clay that dries into rusty red or brown colors, carved with deliberate patterns. These weren't random scratches from sharpening tools or accidental marks. The engravings showed cross-hatched lines, grids, angles, and zigzags created with intention. Someone sat down with a stone or bone tool and carefully carved repeated patterns into these blocks of ochre, and they're roughly 75,000 years old. Why does this matter? Because these aren't pictures of animals or people or anything concrete. They're abstract symbols, shapes that represent ideas rather than objects. This proves that humans that far back weren't just surviving day-to-day like animals. They were thinking symbolically, possibly creating early forms of language or coding systems to communicate complex ideas. The patterns might have been decorative, religious, or informational. Maybe they were territorial markers, family symbols, or even mathematical notation. We may never know their exact meaning, but their existence proves our ancestors were capable of abstract thought far earlier than we believed possible. In northern Spain, Altamira Cave contains some of the most spectacular prehistoric art ever discovered. When these paintings were found in the late 1800s, people thought they were forgeries because no one believed ancient humans could create art this sophisticated. The paintings show bison, deer, and horses rendered in natural colors with remarkable detail. But the artists didn't just paint on flat surfaces. They used the natural curves and bulges in the cave walls to give their animals three-dimensional shape and movement. A bump in the rock becomes the shoulder of a bison. A depression creates the illusion of depth in a horse's chest. Beyond the animals, researchers noticed dots, lines, and handprints scattered throughout the cave. For years, these were dismissed as decoration or meaningless doodles, but recent studies suggest something far more sophisticated. These marks might represent lunar or seasonal cycles, functioning as primitive calendars. If true, this means prehistoric artists were doing more than creating beauty. They were recording knowledge about time, seasons, and astronomical patterns. They were creating visual databases that could be referenced and understood by their community, passing critical survival information across generations through art. Travel to the Tassili Plateau in the Sahara Desert, and you'll find thousands of ancient rock paintings and carvings spread across a massive area. Most show typical prehistoric subjects like animals and hunting scenes, but then there's a group of figures that's harder to explain. Some of these carvings show beings that don't look quite human. They have large, round heads with no facial features, bodies that seem to be wearing full suits, and proportions that don't match normal human anatomy. One famous figure called the Round Head shows a being with a bulbous head surrounded by smaller human-like figures reaching upward almost in worship. Others appear to be floating or hovering rather than standing on ground. There are shapes that look like discs or capsules in the sky. The style is so different from typical prehistoric art that it's sparked decades of debate. Mainstream archaeologists believe these represent gods, shamans in ritual clothing, or spiritual beings from the culture's mythology. But the imagery is strikingly similar to modern depictions of astronauts and spacecraft. Were these ancient artists drawing deities they imagined, or were they documenting something they actually witnessed in the sky? Without written records, we're left to wonder what these artists were really trying to communicate. High in the Bolivian mountains sits Samaipata, a massive carved bedrock platform that's puzzled researchers for decades. The stone is covered with long grooves, circles, and snake-like channels carved directly into the rock. It's shaped somewhat like a flat plaza, leading some to nickname it the landing pad. UNESCO classifies it as a ceremonial platform used by multiple cultures over time. The carvings likely had religious or astronomical significance, possibly related to water flow during rituals. That's the official explanation, and it makes sense. But conspiracy theorists point out that the shape and layout look suspiciously like a prepared landing area for aircraft. The grooves could be guide channels. The circles could mark specific landing zones. Of course, this theory requires accepting that ancient civilizations either had aircraft themselves or were visited by beings who did. The truth is probably more mundane but still impressive. Ancient engineers created this massive structure for ceremonial purposes, demonstrating remarkable planning and effort. Whether it was meant for spiritual communication with the sky or practical use as a landing pad, we may never know for certain, but the scale and precision of the carving shows that whoever built it possessed significant technical knowledge and organizational ability. From the cold depths of Lake Huron to ancient cities across the globe, underwater archaeology keeps proving one thing: our ancestors were far more advanced than we ever gave them credit for. These aren't just old ruins. They're evidence of sophisticated trade networks, strategic engineering, and thriving civilizations that existed thousands of years before recorded history. And here's the wild part. We're just getting started. Every dive, every new technology, every discovery rewrites what we thought we knew. How many more lost cities are still down there waiting to be found? If you're hooked on these underwater mysteries, hit that like button and subscribe. We've got more mind-blowing discoveries coming your way. Thanks for watching.